Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition, and we're going to talk about the Dungeons & Dragons Rollercoaster. All right, so what is the Dungeons & Dragons Rollercoaster? Well, it's almost like an heirloom for the Dungeons & Dragons community. So the Dungeons & Dragons Rollercoaster exists in only one place. It's about to be two places now, but it came out of the Dungeons & Dragons 1980s Saturday morning cartoon. It was red. And it sat six, right? It was a single car. Let's get all the way into it. So, it was called the Dungeons and Dragons Roller Coaster Ride, and it's shown in the intro of the Dungeons and Dragons Saturday morning cartoon. And specifically, what happens is, when the Dungeons & Dragons players at the beginning of the Dungeons & Dragons 1980s Saturday morning cartoon get on the Dungeons & Dragons roller coaster, they go forward on the ride goes forward, and then this magical effect happens, and all of the cars are destroyed except the one car that the player characters are sitting in, right? And it seats six, and when it went through, it had Hank and Eric. And it had Hank and Eric, it had Sheila and Diane, and it had Bobby and Presto. So it sat six, right? So it was one coaster car that sat six people. It was red, like a nice cherry red, almost like the same red that the Gundam shield is, right? And it had this white parapet castle section on it at the front, right? And it's iconic. I think, literally, I would be surprised if 500 million people haven't seen it. Maybe 1 billion people have just seen that image from that intro, right? Because the show's from 1983. That's 93, 2003. We're coming up on... so that's 10, 20... close to 30 years. So even it's close to, 2013, so 93, 2003, 2013, it is, it's almost 40 years old, so the show is 38 years old exactly, right? So the numbers are getting up on Dungeons & Dragons, right? So the D&D Saturday morning cartoon is 38 years old, right? But this thing is iconic, right? So let's talk about what it stands for. Unfortunately, there's a lot of there's a lot of nostalgia and excitement that's connected to it, but there's some sadness too, right? And so one of the pieces of and the reason why we're talking about it today is the Dungeons & Dragons roller coaster is in Wild Beyond the Witchlight, and so the Dungeons & Dragons roller coaster is now going to be Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition canon, right? That's a big deal, right? Canon's a big deal. Jeremy Crawford, just whispered the word on the internet, canon, and every D&D commentator, including myself, came out and did, 3 hours of content on what he had said. Canon really, really, really matters, right? So basically, it is a point of nostalgia. It's a point of excitement. It's an exciting thing, right? But it also stands as a failure. It is an icon of failure for Dungeons & Dragons. Now, why is the Dungeons & Dragons roller coaster an icon of failure for Dungeons & Dragons? Well, the biggest reason is it's just in the cartoons, and after 38 years, all it has reached also is the pages of Wild Beyond the Witchlight, the new Dungeons & Dragons book that is coming out. Release date on that is September 21st, right? So, so it's really something. And so where is the failure point? Well, the sad part is the Dungeons & Dragons roller coaster isn't real, right? Now, that came out 38 years ago. There should be a Dungeons & Dragons roller coaster. Honestly, there should be an entire Dungeons & Dragons theme park, right? There should be a theme park with 50 rides. There should be... there should be a Xanathar's, teacup ride, where you sit in his eyeballs, and, the center sphere, revolves around. And there should be a Tiamat ride, right? And there should be a, Strong Hearts Drop, all these, there should be an entire themed park, but there isn't, right? So one, I know a lot of people think that Dungeons & Dragons is just a game, but that's not, is just fundamentally not true, right? So here's the one other thing that is inarguably Dungeons & Dragons is, and that is an intellectual property. And it's not a small one. It's a big one, but it still has a lot of room to grow. And really, I think one of the when I get frustrated when I hear people say, oh, it's just a game, because I think they're forgetting the fact that it actively competes with some of the biggest intellectual properties in the world, right? So what are the biggest intellectual properties in the world right now? Well, they're Marvel, that's for sure, right? Honestly, I would say DC, but I don't think DC doesn't matter anymore. I think we've all realized that, like DC has died at the hands of Warner Brothers. Like, if they've held the license for so long and done so little with it that I think DC is really no longer a top contender. Marvel, Star Wars, Harry Potter. Those are the biggest brands in the world right now, right? Marvel is way ahead of Dungeons & Dragons. Star Wars was ahead of Dungeons & Dragons, but Star Wars is on a precipitous drop right now. I think a lot of people are increasingly frustrated with Star Wars. I think people were almost done with Star Wars, and then Mandalorian came out, and people were like, oh, cool. Mandalorian's really cool. You can still make good content in Star Wars. And then after 2 seasons, like, the whole thing's just turning into tears and flames. And people are like, oh, Star Wars doesn't matter again. So Star Wars is on a precipitous drop, right? And Harry Potter is on a massive precipitous drop, which means there's an opportunity for Dungeons & Dragons to surge forward and make some real progress, right? But we really haven't landed there yet, in that Dungeons & Dragons still is not really close to having its own theme park, is not really close to having its own theme park, and and that's really, it's disappointing. It is very disappointing that Dungeons & Dragons is not close to having its own theme park, and that the Dungeons & Dragons Rollercoaster really isn't real yet. It's just not, it hasn't manifested, right? And it absolutely should. And so there's a ton of work to be done to get Dungeons & Dragons to where it needs to be. And that work is going to have to happen on the part of Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro, but it's also going to have to happen on the part of the D&D community. I think we as a community need to understand that if the tabletop role-playing industry is going to surge forward, that the fate of the tabletop role-playing game industry is undoubtedly tied to Dungeons & Dragons and no other game, right? No other game is going to save tabletop role-playing games and catapult it into the future and catapult it past Marvel. No other game in tabletop role-playing games has the ability to catapult a tabletop role-playing game intellectual property past Marvel, right? It just doesn't happen, right? Now, I think we can get there, but we also need to realize this is a journey to get Dungeons & Dragons mainstream, right? And that's going to be some hard choices. Now, I will say, I'm very sad about that. I think I look around and I see almost every D&D commentator is just like, here's the best subclass. I think saving throws are dumb. It's just like super myopic, no focus on the industry, no focus on growth, no focus on scale. And the D&D community needs to be there if the game is going, if Dungeons & Dragons is going to surge past Marvel and make the Dungeons & Dragons Rollercoaster real, then, WotC and Hasbro has to do the work, and the D&D community has to do the work. They have to, support it and be flexible when changes come to make the game broader and appealable to more people, and reject things like 7,000 pages of canon, right? And make really fundamental changes to the game, right? The way we play, the way the game is structured and shaped, all of it, right? So that's my opinion. I really want the Dungeons & Dragons Rollercoaster to no longer be an icon of failure, but to be real. I really want the Dungeons & Dragons Rollercoaster to be real, right? I want thousands of people to ride it every day. That's where we need to land. And the reason why I feel so strongly about this is Marvel has nothing that is better than Dungeons & Dragons. In my opinion, arguably is missing a lot of incredible things that Dungeons & Dragons can do that the Marvel intellectual property has never done, will never do, right? And so All that is my opinion. I'd love to hear your thoughts about, what should be done with the intellectual property for Dungeons and Dragons overall. And I'd really love to hear, what you think about, and also, what are your memories of the Dungeons and Dragons roller coaster? Do you agree that there really needs to be, they need to take steps as a company to make it so that the Dungeons and Dragons roller coaster really does become real and actually manifests and becomes an actual thing? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a very wonderful millennium.